Hi guys, Pete the Wargamer here, back with another Flames of War painting tutorial. This time I'll be making use of some Vallejo paints to show you how to paint your US tanks in a black and olive drab camouflage scheme, and I'll be using the new M5 Stuart released as part of the D-Day American range. Before we start painting, we first of all need to apply a primer so that later layers of paint adhere to the miniature surface. For the step, I've chosen to use Vallejo's olive drab spray, as we not only achieve the primer, but we also have the base colour for the later steps. Alternatively, you could instead use a grey primer and apply the olive drab with a regular brush if you don't have access to the spray. For our first step, we want to pick out the raised edges of the tank using some Khaki, and the best way to do this is with a dry brush. Dry brushing involves loading up a fairly large brush with some paint and removing some of the excess onto a tissue or a piece of paper until only a small amount of paint remains in the bristles. With your dry brush ready, lightly drag it across the whole miniature. The paint will start to accumulate onto the hard edges, leaving only a thin line of the Khaki. As you can see, this is a very quick and easy step to perform. Next up, we'll be applying our black camouflage pattern to the hull of our Stuart. To achieve this, we'll be approaching it in two separate ways, and for both of these, we'll be using some black wash to apply the camouflage. The first step is to pick out the edges of the black patches using a relatively fine brush and some black wash straight from the bottle. This makes it easier to set up the scheme and see how the pattern will interact. For a rough guide on where to apply the black patches, check out the image linked in the description below. Now, using a wash might seem like an odd choice here, but it has two distinct advantages. First of all, it's fast. The more fluid nature of washes means you can cover a large area very quickly, and you can achieve those curved edges much more easily due to the smooth flow. Additionally, the wash is semi-translucent. The olive drab base coat is dark enough to allow us to achieve a dark colour, but by still being able to see the dry brush highlights applied in the previous step, we remove the need for any additional highlighting. So once you're happy with the edges, you can start to fill in the areas between the lines in much the same way as you painted the outlines. You may feel that some areas require a couple of coats to get a good black colour, but don't worry if you can still see some patches, as this just adds to the worn nature of the paint job. Now that we have the camouflage scheme completed, we next want to focus on some of the smaller details. However, before we can apply the paint, we first need to thin it down. This can be achieved by mixing water in with your paint in roughly equal parts water to paint until you have a consistency similar to what you see here. For the step, I'll be using chocolate brown and applying it over the metal track links. This dark brown will give the tracks a slightly rusted appearance that we can build upon later in the tutorial. Across the tank, there will be several areas of dark metal and rubber. These will include some of the secondary weapons, along with the stowage items, as well as the rubber tracks and road wheel trims. We want to apply a base coat of German grey to all of these areas, filling the paint in the same way as before. This dark grey colour will allow us to benefit from a black wash later on, something that a pure black wouldn't. Next, we'll be painting any wooden areas, such as the wooden tool handles, with a base coat of German Camo medium brown. With all of the base coats completed, we can now start to apply some washes. These are great for boosting the visibility of details as they will flow into the recessed areas and create the appearance of shadows. The first wash we'll be applying in this way is Sepia Wash, but straight out of the pot it'll be a little too strong, so we first need to water it down a little. Mix water into your wash until you have a consistency similar to what you see here. With your wash thinned, we next want to apply it across the entirety of the armour on our Stuart and also over any other wooden detailing. Ensure that you get a good even coverage of the wash over the surfaces and don't apply too much at a time. Once dried, you'll find that those small details will stand out much more than they did before, and the tank will have a slightly dirty appearance as well. Next up, we'll be using some black wash once again. However, this time we need to thin it in the same way that we thinned down the sepia wash. Once thinned, the wash needs to be applied in two ways. The first is an all-over wash to the German grey details and the tracks, with the second method being much more localized and targeted application of the wash. Using a fairly small brush, I'll be directly applying some black wash into some of the details on the hull. By darkening down certain details such as hatches, hinges and panels, it will make the shadows look deeper. This will result in the illusion that these details are more pronounced than they actually are, helping to improve the realism of the model. With our washes dried, we can begin to add some weathering to the vehicle. The first of these steps involves using some German grey once again. Using a fine brush this time, we want to apply some small paint chips to the vehicle's surface. Lightly dab your brush on the tank and focus on some of the hard edges where damage would more likely to occur from crew movement or debris. This will create some flecks of dark grey that will have the appearance of paint damage. The next step is to add some light dust and mud marks to the tank. To do this, I'll be using some heavily watered down Iraqi sand. You're looking for a consistency similar to a wash here. With this watered down Iraqi sand, we want to target it into some of the recessed and flat areas of the tank, where you could imagine dust and dirt would accumulate. The paint will be much more like a wash, but once dry, will result in a dusty texture. The final step is to add some of the metallic paint, oily steel, to the storage items that we base coated with German grey earlier. Using this paint, we want to carefully apply it along only the edges. A thin brush will help with this. This edge highlighting technique will complete that dark metallic appearance. Once those smaller details have been picked out, we can next apply a dry brush of oily steel over the links of the tank tracks. If you overspill onto the rubber areas, don't worry, as these can be cleaned up with some more German grey. And here we have the completed M5 Stuart. Now, whilst I focus on a Stuart, you could easily apply the same colours and techniques to other US vehicles that were used in the European theatre as well. For this tutorial, I took a lot of inspiration from the Colours of War book recently released to accompany Flames of War. It provides in-depth paint guides that cover an extensive range of World War II and Cold War era infantry and vehicles from multiple nations, eras and theatres. It's definitely worth checking out and is a great reference point for modern history wargamers. You can find a full list of all the paints that I've used in this tutorial in the description below, along with any other equipment that I've used to create this video. If you enjoyed this video, please do let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to be kept up to date with all of my latest videos. And so the only thing left to say is, thanks for watching, and goodbye.